Imagine sitting down at a feast, right? But the food isn't meant for your stomach.
Which is a weird visual, honestly.
It totally is. But it's meant for your brain.
Right.
Because for thousands of years, I mean, billions of people have read the Bible's references to, like, bread, meat, and wine as just literal history.
Yeah, they just take it as a historical ledger.
Exactly. You read about a miraculous meal in the desert, and the traditional approach is just to take it at face value. But what if we were looking at a highly encrypted manual for how the human mind actually acquires truth?
Framing it as an encrypted manual, completely shifts the ground beneath our feet.
It really does.
We are so accustomed to wanting ancient texts to be tangible, right? Historical events we can easily categorize. I mean, you read the word bread and your mind immediately conjures up flour and water.
Oh, absolutely.
But the source material we are analyzing today, it just strips away that comfort entirely. It demands that the reader stop looking at the physical menu and start looking at the cognitive mechanics of learning.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because what if everything you thought you knew about these ancient religious rituals was actually a coded message?
Right, a message about how to learn.
Exactly. How to learn, how to make unbreakable agreements, and how to process information. So, welcome to the deep dive. For you listening right now, our mission today is to deconstruct a really detailed, honestly intense theological lecture.
It is very intense.
Yeah. And this speaker argues that references to food in the Bible, specifically manna, meat, unleavened bread, and most intensely blood, are not literal at all.
Right. They are complex metaphors for consuming knowledge.
Yes. So our goal is to understand how this speaker completely redefines what it means to, consume truth.
What's fascinating here is the sheer consistency of the speaker's logic. I mean, once you accept their premise that digestion essentially equals comprehension, a whole new architecture of meaning emerges from these texts.
It really opens everything up.
It does. And the lecturer asserts that understanding this metaphorical language is basically a matter of spiritual survival. Yeah. So to understand the ultimate and frankly extreme metaphor of blood later on, we first have to establish the baseline of this whole epistemological eating concept.
Right. So the lecture starts by pulling for the books of Matthew and John, specifically focusing on manna.
Mm-hmm.
And historically, manna was the bread that miraculously fell from the sky to feed the Israelites in the desert.
Right, the survival food.
Exactly. And the speaker points out that Jesus refers to himself as the manna from heaven. The source introduces this concept of, like, hidden manna.
Which is such an intriguing phrase.
It really is. And this hidden manna is spiritual food distributed by a faithful servant. The implication is pretty severe, actually.
Yeah, the source is clear. Without this specific hidden knowledge, a person will spiritually starve.
Which is a heavy claim.
It is. The speaker positions this not as like a gentle suggestion, it's an absolute binary. You either consume the true teachings or you wither.
Just completely dry up.
Exactly. But the framework gets far more granular than just, equating food with teaching.
Right. It categorizes the actual types of teachings and the specific methods required to absorb them. And this becomes glaringly apparent when the source examines the Passover Lamb from the book of Exodus.
Oh, man, this part was wild. Because eating the meat of the lamb is presented as a metaphor for consuming the word of God, right?
Yes.
But the source highlights a very specific, almost bizarre detail from Exodus. The Israelites were instructed to eat this meat incredibly fast.
Right. There was no lingering.
No. They couldn't just sit around a fire and chat. They had to eat it standing up, with their shoes on, their belts fastened, and literally a staff in their hand.
They were essentially in a state of combat readiness.
Yeah.
The text explicitly removes all the comfort from the act of eating.
I was actually thinking about this in the context of how we learn today. It's like the difference between sitting down for a leisurely 5-course fine dining experience, right? Where you're debating the subtle notes of a Cabernet or whatever.
Right, very relaxed. Versus going through a rigorous, intensive boot camp. At boot camp, you were just shoveling calories into your mouth standing up because you have a mission in 5 minutes.
That is a perfect parallel.
You were taking in essential survival knowledge. And the text, according to this lecture, is saying, like, learn this urgently. Be spiritually ready to move right now.
That boot camp analogy really captures the cognitive load the speaker is describing, because acquiring true knowledge in this framework, it isn't a passive, relaxing hobby.
No, not at all.
It requires urgent, almost uncomfortable readiness. You aren't lingering over the, aesthetic beauty of the words. You are absorbing the raw data needed to survive the impending shift in your reality.
So, okay, if meat is the urgent substance of the teaching, what regulates the purity of that teaching?
That is the big question.
Right. And that brings us to the source's fascinating distinction regarding unleavened bread.
Mm-hmm.
So unleavened bread is flat bread, right? Made without any yeast.
Exactly. Think about what yeast actually does in a physical sense.
It ferments.
Right. It ferments and introduces gas to puff up the dough. The dough looks much larger, much more substantial on the outside.
But it's mostly just air.
Exactly. That extra volume is literally just empty air. And the source argues that human traditions puff up a teaching in the exact same way.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeast represents social etiquette, cultural norms, and, human egos that bloat a message without adding any actual spiritual nutrition.
The speaker is actually quite funny and, well, really intense about this in the lecture.
They definitely have a style.
They do. They mention that if they were to teach using the yeast of human traditions, like, I don't know, incorporating specific Korean cultural rules or dictating human etiquette about how to dress or manage a household, the listeners just wouldn't be able to handle the core truth.
Right, they'd get totally sidetracked.
Exactly. They would get distracted by the human drama.
Yeah.
So the unleavened bread represents teachings that are purely spiritual, completely devoid of the fluff of human customs.
It basically forces a brutal minimalism on the learner.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
If a teaching is full of social rules, if it makes you feel comfortable because it aligns with your specific cultural norms, then it's full of yeast.
Right.
It's not the pure, unleavened truth. You are filling your mind with empty air.
And we also have to look at the other side of this, like nutritional matrix the source builds. The speaker draws a really sharp contrast between drinking milk and eating solid food.
Which seems to dictate the pace at which different people can actually absorb these unleavened teachings.
Yeah, exactly.
The source uses the image of an infant crying for milk to illustrate a very specific stage of intellectual and spiritual development.
Right. When an infant is hungry, they need immediate, simple sustenance.
You have to feed them right away, or they panic. They don't have the teeth or the digestive enzymes to process anything complex.
And we see this all the time in modern media. I mean, people want the milk of superficial summaries.
Constantly.
They want the headline, the quick takeaway, the easy-to-digest soundbite that makes them feel informed without requiring any actual cognitive effort.
Right, because if you try to give them something dense, they completely reject it.
Exactly. They reject it because they literally lack the capacity to break it down.
Yeah, but the lecture points out a stark reality here. If you keep feeding a growing child nothing but milk, they become stunted.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Milk represents the absolute foundational, easy-to-digest concepts. Mature learners, those who are actually growing spiritually and intellectually, must graduate to solid food.
They have to chew.
Exactly. They require complex, challenging truths that take time to chew, swallow, and painstakingly digest.
And the speaker actively challenges the audience during the lecture about this. They essentially warn them, like, I'm feeding you solid food now that's going to be difficult to chew, but you have to be able to handle it.
They set the expectation immediately.
It's all building this incredible interconnected architecture. I mean, digestion is comprehension. Manna is the baseline truth. Meat is the urgent survival knowledge.
Unleavened bread is the uncorrupted teaching.
Right. And solid food is the complex reality meant for the mature mind. But all of this eating, all of this learning, it's just a prerequisite.
Yeah, it's all leading somewhere.
Exactly. It's preparation for something much more permanent.
Because food sustains you day to day, but this lecture is moving toward a permanent shift in reality, a covenant,
Right.
an unbreakable agreement. And in the ancient world, a true covenant requires something far more intense than just bread or meat.
It requires blood.
Yes.
In Exodus 24, blood was used to seal a covenant. It was the ultimate signature. You keep the word, you live. You break the agreement, you die.
It signifies that life itself is on the line. The stakes are absolute.
Yeah.
And the speaker in the source humorously contextualizes this by comparing it to those dramatic blood oaths you see in old mafia or bandit movies.
Oh, right. Like, we swear to die on the same day.
Exactly. Two characters declare, we aren't born on the same day, but we swear to die on the same day. And then they literally cut their hands and mix their blood. It's an irreversible commitment.
It is the ultimate point of no return. But, how does this dramatic blood oath connect back to consuming knowledge?
Right, that's the jump.
The source bridges this gap by bringing us to the Last Supper in the book of Matthew. And the cognitive insight here is just staggering. At the Last Supper, Jesus takes a single loaf of bread and breaks it.
Mm-hmm.
And the source asks a deceptively simple question: why break it? Why not just have 12 separate rolls ready for the disciples?
Which is such a brilliant detail to focus on.
Right.
Because the lecture treats this figure not just as a historical character, but as the anthropomorphized embodiment of absolute reality. Jesus represents one unified truth, one immense loaf of divine reality.
But the human mind just cannot process ultimate, infinite truth all at once. If you try to hand someone the entire unified theory of reality, their brain will short circuit.
Absolutely.
It must be fragmented into digestible, sequenced lessons.
Yeah.
He has to break the truth down and distribute it piece by piece so the 12 different human minds in that room can actually comprehend it.
Right. He is cognitively sequencing the theology so they can consume it.
Yeah.
But the breaking of the bread is only the first half of the ritual. The most critical part of that supper is the introduction of the new covenant. Jesus uses wine and states, "This is my blood of the covenant."
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. The source argues that the wine was never meant to be the final answer.
No, not at all.
The wine is just a temporary placeholder. It's a memorial. And why? Because the true prophecy, the actual fully realized kingdom of God, had not yet been fulfilled on earth.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the speaker is delivering a profound critique of religious traditionalism here.
They really are.
The lecture uses a brilliant analogy to explain the psychology of this placeholder.
Yes, the Eiffel Tower analogy.
Yes.
The speaker talks about wanting to visit the Eiffel Tower in France,
Yes.
right? So, a friend goes to Paris and brings you back a little miniature Eiffel Tower souvenir.
A little plastic one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You hold on to that plastic souvenir, you put it on your shelf, and it reminds you of the promise that one day you'll go to Paris.
Right.
But when you finally travel to France and you're actually standing under the massive iron structure of the real Eiffel Tower, you don't need the souvenir anymore. You throw it away.
The source is arguing that the literal wine drunk in religious rituals for the last 2,000 years is just the plastic souvenir.
Wow.
It was necessary because the real blood, the fulfilled living truth of the prophecy actually coming to pass, wasn't available yet.
Right.
The tragedy, according to this framework, is that human beings fall in love with the souvenir.
Because people feel safer with the ritual.
Yeah.
I mean, a plastic Eiffel Tower fits in your pocket. You can control it.
Exactly.
Standing under the actual 1,000-foot iron monument is overwhelming. So the speaker asks, if you are standing under the real Eiffel Tower, why are you still clutching the tiny plastic one?
Right, it makes no sense.
Why are people still clinging to the literal ritual of drinking wine and eating crackers when they should be aggressively searching for the actual fulfillment of the words?
Because holding on to the literal ritual when the actual truth has arrived completely neutralizes the purpose of the covenant.
It totally does.
The wine was just meant to tide humanity over until the ultimate knowledge that true blood was ready to be consumed.
But wait. If blood is the ultimate fulfilled truth of this covenant, right, the absolute highest level of knowledge, then we run into a massive paradox in the text.
Big deal.
And the source spends a lot of time untangling this contradiction.
Right, the epistemological paradox of cleansing versus forbidden consumption.
Yeah, so on one hand, you have the book of Revelation, which talks about people washing their robes in the blood of the Lamb, and the robes turn perfectly white.
Which is such a jarring image.
It is. And the speaker points out how literally absurd this is. If you take a white shirt and wash it in real blood or even real wine, it's going to stain it red. It's ruined.
It literally makes no sense in the physical world.
Exactly.
But metaphorically, though, it aligns perfectly within this cognitive framework. The robes represent a person's behavioral state or, their internal mindset.
Right.
The blood is the ultimate verified truth. So washing your robes in blood means systematically using this profound truth to cleanse your mind of falsehoods, making you spiritually clean or white. It's the truth that buys the people and purifies their actions.
Okay, so blood is the ultimate cleansing truth. But then the source pivots to the book of Acts chapter 15 and the book of Deuteronomy. And in those texts, there's a strict, severe law. You're absolutely forbidden from eating blood. And specifically, you are forbidden from eating animals that were strangled to death.
This is where the lecture requires maximum critical thinking from the listener because the metaphor folds in on itself here.
It really does.
How can blood be the ultimate truth you must consume to live, while simultaneously being a forbidden substance that will defile you?
Wait, I'm struggling with this leap. I am trying to follow the speaker's logic. If the ancient text literally says, don't eat strangled animals, how on earth does a reader make the leap to don't listen to literalist teachers?
It seems disconnected.
That feels like a massive, almost arbitrary reach, What is the bridge connecting those two ideas?
Well, the bridge is the literal function of strangulation.
Yeah.
What happens when an animal is strangled?
It suffocates.
Right, it suffocates. The blood, which we've established, represents the life, or the core spiritual message does not drain out. It stays trapped inside the dead physical body.
Ah, I see. The blood is trapped in the flesh.
Exactly. So according to this framework, an animal strangled to death represents a teacher or a religious system that has been metaphorically strangled by the literal letter of the law.
Wow.
The meaning never escapes the literal words on the page.
The text itself has become a noose. The source quotes Corinthians, the letter kills, but the spirit gives life. So a strangled animal is a dead teacher teaching dead, literal words. The meaning is trapped in the history, totally unable to give life to the listener.
Therefore, eating forbidden blood, or as the source sometimes categorizes it, eating the meat of pigs and dogs, means accepting the doctrines of these false teachers.
You are swallowing their dead, suffocated worldview.
Exactly. You are ingesting information that has no spiritual life in it because it simply refuses to look past the literal history.
So practically speaking, for someone trying to navigate this metaphorical landscape, how does this work? I mean, if I'm listening to a lecture or reading a text, how do I apply this framework to distinguish between the blood, the true teachings of a real messenger, versus a false teacher who is strangled by literalism?
This raises an important question, and it is honestly the ultimate litmus test provided by the lecture. The source demands you evaluate the actual effect of the information you are consuming. If a teaching only focuses on rigid, literal rules like the historical events, the physical rituals, the human traditions of when to stand and sit, it is the letter that kills.
Right.
It is forbidden blood.
Because it doesn't transform your mind. It just binds you to a set of ancient behaviors. It's the yeast puffing you up with self-righteousness while you spiritually starve.
Precisely. But if the teaching unlocks the text, revealing a transformative understanding of how to process truth, how to decode reality, and how to relate to the divine, the spirit that gives life, then that is the true blood.
That makes so much sense.
You know the difference by whether the teaching liberates your cognitive understanding or suffocates it under blind, unthinking ritual. The false teacher is trapped in the text, and if you consume their suffocated words, your mind becomes trapped too.
This is such a radical way of viewing information. It completely flips the script on how we are supposed to interact with ancient text.
It really does.
You aren't supposed to memorize the menu, right? You're supposed to extract the nutritional value and actually eat the meal. And this brings us to the ultimate relevance of this deep dive for you, the listener. Because if you are tuning into this, you are someone who loves to learn. You are constantly consuming information articles, books, deep dives, lectures. This source material, even though it's wrapped in intense biblical theology, challenges you to critically examine your own intellectual diet.
It forces you to ask, are you drinking the milk of superficial summaries? Seeking out the easy answers that don't challenge your existing worldview.
Right.
Or are you doing the hard work of chewing the solid food of deep, complex, sometimes uncomfortable truth?
Yeah. And most importantly, when you listen to an expert or a leader or a media personality, are you consuming the lifeblood of insightful, verified, transformative knowledge?
Exactly.
Or are you swallowing the forbidden blood of dead, literalist information that completely lacks nuance? Are you following teachers who are strangled by their own rigid dogmas, trapping you in their suffocated worldview?
It is a phenomenal heuristic for evaluating the media and the ideologies we ingest daily. Are we eating to grow, or are we eating to stagnate?
It makes you hyper-aware of what you allow into your mind.
It definitely does. And, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder, building on that brilliant concept of the placeholder.
Oh, yes.
We talked about the wine being just a souvenir, right? A temporary, comfortable ritual waiting for the real complex truth to arrive.
The miniature plastic Eiffel Tower on the shelf.
Right. So look at your own life. What are the placeholders you are holding on to? What outdated frameworks, temporary beliefs, or daily rituals are you clinging to simply out of comfort, tradition, or fear of the unknown?
That's a great question.
And the real challenge is when the actual, complex, fully realized truth finally reveals itself to you, will you have the courage to drop the souvenir?
Because at the end of the day, you don't want to spend your entire life admiring a plastic toy when the real tower is standing right in front of you. You don't want to just stare at the literal surface of the text when the real mystery, the living, breathing reality, is asking you to dive deeper.
Absolutely.
You have to look past the letter to find the spirit. And that is the true meal. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep chewing on those ideas, and we'll catch you next time.